Hello, everyone. This is a new episode of the China Manufacturing Decoded podcast. This is Renaud here from Sofeast. And today we are doing an episode on the challenges of quality management in China. And I have a guest here, a returning guest, Clive Greenwood, who's been on the podcast quite a few times to discuss compliance topics and quality related topics. Hello, Clive. Do you want to give us a short intro so the listeners maybe who haven't listened to you in the past know a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Hello, good morning, everybody, or good evening, depending on the world, wherever you are. I'm Clive Greenwood. I'm the Senior Compliance Officer for SMC Global. I work predominantly in heavily regulated industries such as medical devices, automotive, sometimes in electronics, shall we call it, as a basic terminology. Normally, if you've seen me on here before, I'm the voice of doom and gloom, but today I'm feeling quite chirpy. So
this is a good time to record a podcast without sounding too gloomy.
Yeah.
All right. So today is a podcast, and I guess a lot of people who listen to it will be like, yeah, right. So it's not just about hitting on China, just saying bad things about Chinese people and so on, right? But it's also about warning. Okay, if you come from a different culture, this is the kind of things that you will experience, and then sort of this is how you get around it, right? It's not just about saying bad things, bad mouthing a country or its culture. China is famous for doing things big, for doing things very fast. Some of their companies have risen to being global leaders and technological leaders, especially relatively fast, by hook or by crook, as we would say. But these days, it's really transitioning more to themselves having their own R&D teams and labs and doing a lot of the hard work themselves and really being world leaders in some industries, right? So things have been changing. There's the old China and there's the new China, right? And there's still an overlap of both of them, which is interesting, right? So again, we're not just going to say bad things, just badmouth the country, but still what we're trying to do is for people who are trying to manufacture product in China at consistent quality and deliver products, that are reliable, that are fully compliant, that were made without cutting any corners, that are satisfactory to the users, and that are, fully conform to specifications. Well, there are challenges, and they need to know about it. Okay.
Let's look at what is the root cause of this problem. And what I believe is that there is two competing cultural views here. The first one is that the buyers often don't tell the suppliers what they really want. They don't give them the information because they think it's going to be copied. And secondly, the suppliers won't tell you. They may know, but they won't tell you. And, if you do an investigation into the supply chain, they won't tell you. So you've got a buyer that's not saying anything and the supplier that won't tell. You've got a recipe for disaster.
Okay, so you're going straight for maybe the biggest source of quality issues here. Yes, improper improper communication, basically. Fully agree. So there's on the buyer side, and it's I think you did right. It comes from the buyer, it comes from the supplier, and maybe. Let's not try to assign, 70% of blame to this party and 50% of blame to that party and so on, right? But a lot of buyers come to China like it's a supermarket, and they're saying they can just pick something and say, I want this. And they would just pay and maybe wait for delivery, like it's Amazon, I should say, right? Mm-hmm. And that is an enormous problem. Okay. They don't specify what they want. They expect a lot of things that may not be true. They pick a sample, maybe that the manufacturer, has in their sample room, but has never made actually comes from somewhere else. And then they're going to have to try to figure out how to make it or to subcontract it, or who can make it and where's the tooling. Oh, we don't know. And all kinds of things
and
like
most
that.
Most of the time they're asking the buyer to pay up 50% up front anyway.
In these cases, especially, right.
Yeah.
So the supplier wants to get the money. Okay, that's the incentive. Obviously, you go to a manufacturer, they want to get things going. They want to get the payment. So they're not going to start to ask a lot of questions. Okay, like when someone comes to us, first we ask a ton of questions and we give them a long questionnaire. Setting up the product requirements first. Otherwise, nothing can be done. What kind of product is it? What does it do? What kind of use case? What kind of users? Et cetera, et cetera. What if this happens to the product? What if that happens? And so on and so forth. The typical Chinese supplier, I'm not saying all of them, obviously, but the typical average Chinese supplier will say, okay, no problem. And then they will tend to work on the basis of samples. Okay, make a prototype, send it to you. You say, okay, it means that as long as it's generally consistent with that physical, tangible sample, it's okay. But for the buyer, it means something else. It means, okay, it's got to be compliant with the market where it's going to be sold. It's going to be consistently made exactly the same way with the same finishing and no quality issues, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to function. All of them are going to function well. Maybe they're going to have a 5-year life and so on, but they don't tell the supplier. This is what you mean by the buyer doesn't communicate, right? And maybe the buyer doesn't want to say, where it's going to be sold, how it's going to be used, as you mentioned, because they're afraid the Chinese side may invite themselves on their market.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's look at something which is often not really understood, and that is something which is called the duty of notification. Okay. Now, we, as in a Western company, shall we say, okay, would expect that the supplier understands his duty of notification. Now, this concept just simply does not exist here. It is not part of the business culture. I may know that this isn't going to work, but I'm not going to tell you because I just want the money. All right?
Yeah.
There is also, on the other side of this, the duty of notification. Also, if you're buying from a person, you should tell them exactly what they should meet.
Yeah, goes both ways, obviously. Yeah.
Goes both ways, yeah. We're expecting it one way, but we're not prepared to give it the other way. This is not...
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, there is a concept here which is trust. And that trust is, do you trust your supplier?
Mm-hmm.
Simple fact, yes or no. Now, if the answer is no, then you shouldn't be doing business with them.
Okay. Yeah, there's got to be a basic level of trust. And there's got to be a basic level of openness to, this is the product, this is how it's going to be used, this is where it's going to be sold, And obviously with proper non-use, non-circumvention agreements and, and so on and so forth, in place. It's not sufficient, but it's necessary, right? But you need to work with, that's what we often tell our clients. Yeah. Look at the business model of the supplier. If the business model of the supplier is to accumulate a number of products and then pretend or claim that they own the IP, the intellectual property rights to these products, and resell them to various buyers, that's much, much riskier for you, the buyer, right? Than if they are a pure contract manufacturer and say, oh, no, we don't have any products. We just work with different companies on different products. It's their products, and we don't even have a showroom, So let's talk about our capabilities, come and visit the factory, but don't look at the showroom, right? So these are two opposite kind of manufacturers. And if you work with one, your risk profile is going to be very different from the other one. Have you observed that also?
Yes. Yeah. multiple times. For me, you must do an SQM. You must do an investigation. I would say you got to start your due diligence on a supplier a long time before you actually phone them.
Yeah,
you should be, yeah. But within that, you must have a strategy for qualification. That strategy for qualification must be more than simple certificates on a wall.
Of course, you need to scratch below the surface a bit. Yeah. And you need to send someone on site. I mean, usually that's what it ends up, being. You can check their legal records. There's a number of companies can help with, gathering a little bit of information and interpreting them, including lawyers and so on. But also, if you don't actually have someone go on site and check, okay, what kind of company is this? What kind of processes do they have in-house? Do they actually have a quality system? And then, is it actually consistent with the needs that we have in terms of quantity, in terms of, quality level, in terms of maybe experience with different kinds of regulations? What is the maturity of the quality management system? What is their ability to develop a new product in a structured way, for our industry? I mean, people just gloss over that. And very risky.
Remember when we used to, in days of old, when kings were kings and knights were bold, we had two words, capability and capacity. Those were the two watchwords. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Capability, basically, quality, right? So capability is the capability of the processes to deliver consistently good parts. Yeah.
That's right.
And capacity, yeah. If you're going to place large orders, you can't work with a tiny manufacturer because they will be forced to subcontract and, to farm your orders out here and there. And which happens
a lot.
Oh, which is endemic in China, and let's say this way. Yeah. And we see some big retailers, such as Walmart, probably the most prominent one, actually forcing their importers. If you're going to have production in a factory, that's fine. Okay, first it needs to be audited for social compliance and things like that. But also you need to have someone in the country to keep watching. You need to have a capacity plan, to see if the lead time is going to be sufficient. There's going to be no subcontracting. You're going to be monitoring what happens. And in the end, you're going to be responsible for the quality that they deliver. And if it's no good, we don't pay you. Okay. That's the Walmart approach boiled down in a few sentences. They're very happy to rely on a number of middlemen to take all these risks and do all this oversight and so on. They also obviously manage a lot of direct orders.
I would suggest that Walmart's business model is to find as many levels of installation of liability that they can find.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that. So for a small company, right, there's basically two types of situations, if you really boil it down, right? Either you develop your own product, you own your own products. And in that case, you need to go deep. You need to, you're going to sort of be married to the manufacturer, because if you need to redevelop it with another manufacturer, it might be the same product, but you still have a lot of work to do and so on, right? So you need to find someone for the long run. You need to do a lot of due diligence. If you're going to just come and pick like Amazon, oh, I like this SKU, I like this SKU, the price is okay, the lead time is okay, let's sign a deal, I send you some money, you make it, you ship it to me. That is a very different approach, and a lot of companies do that, but very often the margin doesn't even support proper due diligence and proper monitoring of production. And that's where a lot of the
this falls down.
Yeah.
You see,
because they're just a distributor also in the eyes of the manufacturer.
Yeah. The way that you've got to think about this is, okay, if we look at about strategic long-term direction, if you're buying products from China, you should have a strategic long-term plan. And that plan should be consistent between the supplier and the buyer. There's no point in trying to build a strategic relationship with a company that expects to be sold in 6 months' time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Now, if your strategic plan is to buy it cheap, then you deserve everything that you get. From my point of view, I have no time for people that their first question is how much. Yeah. That type of buyer, I won't even represent you. I won't even go and do a plan for you. This is what's wrong. You've got people that are buying cheap and then complaining when the quality is not right because they haven't told them what the quality should be, because then the manufacturer would put the price up.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is that some companies are more driven by purchasers and accountants. Some other companies are driven more by engineers and the quality people, right? And to get back to what I was mentioning before, very often the companies that want to buy an existing product, sort of shopping on Amazon, will tend to be driven by purchasers and accountants. Very often if it's small companies, there's nobody in quality, nobody in engineering. The companies that develop their own products will tend to be driven more from the engineering and quality side. And from there, we can see clearly there's two groups of buyers. And to get back to what you mentioned before, the companies that are looking for something cheap, that are looking for something already existing, that don't spend the time to explain to the supplier what they want, but these ones are much more likely to be in trouble, right? So that's the buyer side. Okay. Now you mentioned also, obviously the supplier doesn't want to open up, doesn't want to help the customer, maybe do a better job of specifying, what the product should be like. Don't want to offer transparency into the supply chain, right? So how does this impact quality?
Well, I don't see how you can maintain reliability and quality without a full investigation of the capacity and capability of that company. A part of that due diligence would be looking at their supply chain. If you cannot do that, it should be a massive red flag.
Yeah.
You should be saying to yourself, our strategic obligation and our strategic direction do not meet.
Right. Yeah, proper due diligence. Let's say, I don't know, a simple consumer electronic product. Okay. Well, looking at it, very often there's some critical components, right? The PCBA, the battery, maybe the plastic housing is custom designed. So yeah, that's important. Maybe the display, right? There's a few critical components. Then if these function, maybe they do PCBA internally, but then all the rest comes from suppliers. Well, it's very, very important for the customer to know where do these components come from. And very often it does involve actually sending an auditor to the companies that manufacture these components, because then you can say, okay, big risk here, medium risk here. The rest is mostly small risk. So where, you can make a decision, go or no go with this supplier. And also, where to monitor, because you have an idea where the risk is going to be, right? So
let me give you a classic example here, which I've literally just gone through. There are companies in, shall we say, the Guangdong area, where they have picking lists depending on volume. So if you've got a high volume, you will tend to get the good products. If you have low volume, you get the ones which are left after the first pick, or the second pick, or the third pick. Now, if that's the case, how in God's name are you going to guarantee your quality?
Yeah. Are you a good customer, basically, in the eyes of that supplier, right? If you don't ensure that, then you're going to have a second choice or third choice project manager, etc., quality engineer, and maybe even the components and so on. You're going to have sort of the leftovers, if I may say that. That is for sure.
I myself have just actually gone through that and actually stopped that happening with a client of mine who was actually getting third and fourth pick and wondering why his quality defect rates were all over the place.
Yeah. In part, that was, I guess, because they had not specified exactly how to do it. They were not controlling as close to the source as possible, right?
Yeah. Okay, now we put in within the SQM and the qualification period, the qualification processes, the fact that there is clear, definitive, measurable standards of performance that these products must meet. And they must be verified, validated all the time, every time, right? Otherwise, the whole thing gets shipped back. We don't want it. The problem here that many people come across is that there is always this rush to get the products instead of the thought of, shall I call it, they will put it right over the air mentality.
You're thinking about Tesla and these kinds of companies. It's not really a problem. We'll fix it after.
Yeah. I myself, obviously, as a compliance officer, I just cannot hold with that. To me, it is, that it's the same as playing Russian roulette with 6 bullets in the gun. The result is going to be the same, no matter what you do. I mean, the most famous saying of quality people is Einstein's most profound law: to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and expect a different result is the height of stupidity. Yeah, there is evidence. There is more evidence than you can say where people have just not done their due diligence, but expected the Chinese supplier to tell them where it's wrong.
Right.
It is a divergence of business culture.
Exactly. They expect the supplier to tell them what's wrong, but the supplier is thinking, hey, where's my money? I just want to go into mass production fast. I don't want you to keep tweaking your product, right? Because then you're going to keep asking me questions. I'm going to have to keep doing some free work. And then who knows when it goes into production? No. I want you to be in the mood that the product is good, you're confident, and you go ahead and you send the money, right? And we move the product, ship it out to you.
And that's the last that we hear of it.
And next time we hear about you, it's for another order, right? That's their incentive. Seriously, as a buyer, you are setting the incentive that way, but you're expecting them to be acting like, professional advisors. There's a disconnect, right? There's a big disconnect. And as you mentioned, yes, in Chinese culture, the duty to inform and so on and so forth, it doesn't really exist. So this is a very, very dangerous area.
You've also got to go on to the other topic that we have on the list today, is this idea of the concept of separation of powers. You may be talking to the quality guy. You may have your quality guy and their quality guy talking on a daily basis and agreeing that this is how it should be. But then the Chinese boss says, no, that costs too much money. Do it this way.
And don't tell them.
So your entire quality system has to have something or a structure and a mechanism within that really just does not allow that to happen. In China, it's always right.
Doesn't work like that.
Don't work that way.
Yeah. And it comes from political systems. I mean, the British political system, is the first one that really combined a government that's accountable to the people, a professional government, and so on and so forth, including the separation of power, right? And in China, it's never been like that.
I don't think I would hold up the British political system as any shining castle on a hill by any stretch of the imagination at the moment. But
no, at the moment for sure. But if you look the book
what you're talking about there is the Magna Carta. You're talking about the Magna Carta where the king is a constitutional king and has no real power. Now if you believe that,
yeah. So,
but anyway,
my point was more that there's this at least an idea, right? That's in many people's minds, in Europe, in North America, and so on. But it's never been really present in the Chinese political system. It was always about having a very strong government that will decide, right? And in Chinese companies, they also have this concept that there's a strong leader who will make the shots, will decide. We say, no, that's the way we do, that's the way we do. And who is going to stand up to this strong leader? Not his staff. That just doesn't happen. They say yes.
Yeah,
that doesn't happen.
Right? If you talk to any Chinese company, both yourself and myself, we have both done many audits on companies, and the word which you seldom hear is the word no. Okay, yeah. This is where you get into the problem. Okay, this is where this idea of don't say it, and it's almost like don't ask, don't tell, because this is what we're looking at. It's the same sort of concept here. The guys that you send into a company to do an audit, first of all, must know what they're looking for. You can't have someone with 6 months experience and a brand new shiny certificate to go into a company and sit down with a Laobang who thinks he's God and question him.
Yeah, that's not going to go well.
That's not going to go well. It's just not going to happen. So, if you're going to use auditors, have auditors with, I would say more than 10 years experience in manufacturing, if it's a manufacturing audit. Someone that can go and walk into that factory and see and know when things are wrong. Not just look at the nice shiny pictures on the wall and say, oh, yeah, look, yes, they do this. And they'll go, oh, yes, they have a ISO 9001 certificate. That's tick box. Yes, they've got the certificate.
Right.
They may have bought that certificate on Taobao. Yeah.
There's a lot of tick box auditors. Do they have this paperwork? Yes. Do they have this paperwork? Yes. And that brings us to another point on our list is, formalities over substance, right? Let's get the paperwork done, and that's going to be enough, sort of, right? And there's a lot of companies do their due diligence and so on, actually by following this principle, right? Because it's so prevalent in China, and it's more convenient, it's easier, and the Chinese side will pay attention to it, and they will say, oh, here's this document, right? So, okay, great, I'm going to look at it, and okay, that's good. Let's go ahead. That's very risky, right?
The old saying, BS baffles brains.
Yeah. At work every day here.
Every day, yeah. So if you're sending an auditor, have someone with management experience, seniority, knowledge on the subject, and knowledge about manufacturing. Now that might not be one person, that might be 3 people from certain areas, yeah. Because I believe that if you're doing a potential manufacturing audit, you need people from finance looking there. You need people from quality looking there. You need people from manufacturing looking there. So in other words, you have a supplier quality management team. People that can actually go in there and ask the hard questions. And if they get stonewalled, then you have the senior guy there that goes and sits down with the Laobang and says, you will answer this or you will not get the order.
Someone who goes up and says, hey, we're getting blocked here. This is no good. You cannot pass this audit and get the business if people keep stonewalling. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Now, this is for, let's clarify things for some of the auditors. This kind of audit, is going to like thousands of dollars. That's pretty obvious, right? And you need to build that budget in your due diligence. If you go with the more standard, quick look kind of audits, you're not going to get that. It's going to be very specific about this part of their system, and you're going to get a snapshot of that. And that's a starting point. It might be a first screening, okay? I would not say that this is totally useless. I would say very often push the clients to say, hey, start with this. It's just like initial evaluation or something to have a picture about it. And already just with this snapshot, the photos of the organization, is it a mess? Is it organized? What kind of things do they have in-house and so on? You already have a first way of screening out. You do it on 3 different companies. You can already screen out 2 of them probably. But then you go more in depth on the last one, right? Then it comes down to more in-depth due diligence on site, but not only on site, as you mentioned, but also the key suppliers, if they open up. And that should be one of the questions you ask at the very beginning when you're doing sourcing. You meet a potential supplier, then you say, hey, okay, but here I see 3 critical components. Are they made in-house? Can we see the processes and everything when we come to your factory? No, okay. Are you going to be open to this? Can we audit the manufacturers? Because if not, that's an unbearable amount of risk. We're not going to give you orders if we don't know if these places are properly managed.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it in the way that we've spoke on other podcasts, and when we look at what the European requirements are going to be, if there is no traceability in that product, you're not going to be selling it. Yeah, there is got to be a realization. Okay, there needs to be a point somewhere within this blob of a supply chain, what people try to call as a managed supply chain, which is far from managed, to a sense of reality. Okay, there is total chaos. If you are buying from China and you don't have people with eager eyes looking over people's shoulders, there is a risk growth like this, that something is going to get through. And that something is going to end up costing you a lot more than what it did to have a proper auditor go there.
Yes, you have to also, from the very start, think of compliance requirements, obviously, and see, okay, is this manufacturer going to be supporting or are they going to be hindering? And if, for example, you want to sell to the EU and you look at the upcoming eco-design regulation for sustainable products, I think that's the entire name, you need them to offer you the level of transparency in the supply chain that you need. Otherwise, you know that this manufacturer will just be a pain, and your product at one point will no longer be compliant. That's a rather
and could put you in legal jeopardy.
Yes,
it's not just a risk of the product's going to be bad and it's going to give us a bad name, and we could have problems. We could end up in court.
Yes, right.
Okay.
Right. And all of that because of the lack of transparency. And I think that's another key challenges in China for not just quality management, obviously, right? It's a huge problem for compliance management. It's a big problem for the purchasers just to have an idea about, hey, why are you raising your prices like this, and how can I counter that? But I don't even know what goes into the product, so I can't really counter it, right? It's a challenge at many levels for the buyers. But why, if we step back, why are Chinese companies trying to hide their supply chain so much more than, say, an American company? Like, it doesn't mean that American companies will be totally transparent about where they buy the materials and so on, but there's a difference. There's much more effort in China at hiding what really is going on, right? At saying, stop with me, you buy from me, you don't see what's happening behind, right? Yeah. This is a black box.
Yeah. I suppose the answer to that is one of trust. In big companies, for example, in China, no one buyer will have a total view of where everything is bought from. You may have a buyer that buys PCBAs and no idea where he buys LCDs from. This concept of of a supply chain management is like not there.
That's right.
So
that's right. And then you introduce an ERP because the boss wants to have transparency over, how much they're paying for everything to catch where the purchasers are getting the payback, right? That's another topic, but it's related. It's part of the problem. Yeah.
Part of the problem, yeah. So, you have your quality management system must address that, which means that when you do the audit, you must see that there is actually a working quality system, not just they got the certificate. Obviously. Same goes for product qualifications as well. You know as well as I do that the only thing you need to do is send 12 samples to the certifying body. Doesn't mean whatsoever that it's going to be made the same way. It may not actually, and probably not even that this Chinese manufacturer actually made these samples that have gone for testing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people rely way too much on lab test reports and certificates and things like that. But it has to be accompanied with monitoring of what actually happens and how the different productions are actually made.
Yeah, but the buyers, the European buyers, don't understand this. They think that, wow, that's a certified product. Well, if you read the bottom line on all of these test reports, okay, the test report represents the samples have tested at this specific time. It doesn't say anything about, it just means that they tested 12 and everything was fine. Doesn't mean that the 112th is going to be the same.
It's a snapshot. Right now, I see this product. It passes that standard. Period. Yep. Up to you to make your judgment.
Yeah, it's
right.
A story. Yeah.
Is it going to be consistently the same? You got to watch.
That's right, and then it's up to you to actually have either the confidence in your supplier that they are going to be truthful, honest, and transparent, or you put somebody in there who's a pain in the arse to make sure that it is. Choice.
Right.
It depends on how much you value your own product.
Yeah, right. Let's go into another challenge. So you mentioned before, some buyers are just looking for cheap products, right? Cheap product. And when Chinese suppliers hear that and they see, oh, this customer is negotiating the price, they want low price, or maybe something else, or they want it very fast, right? It's got to be fast. I noticed many times they do this at the expense of quality. So maybe they will buy substandard materials. Maybe they will just rush it through assembly, fail to test it, do a really bad job. And then you point it to them, but they have a comeback. They say, yeah, but you told us to rush. Or, yeah, but look, the price is low. You can't expect very high quality, do you? And to them, and from what I read also in the eyes of a Chinese judge in a court of justice here, it just doesn't work that way, right? And I'm sure you've heard that many times also, right?
Yeah, the thing is that it depends on whether or not you believe in the fourth and fifth dimension. Cheap, fast, and quality do not belong in the same dimension.
Exactly. Yeah. The quality standard is the quality standard and is independent of all of that, right? That's the way the buyer should keep emphasizing, hey, we discussed these other things, but the quality standard is not changing. And that's the way we're going to validate that you did a good job or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, cheap and quality, okay, like I said, they don't belong on the same dimension, but you've also got the cheap, fast, and now. All right. So if you're buying a product from China, you've got to think months, not weeks. And if you're thinking of days, then you're just asking for it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So promotional products, right? That's like the worst.
Yeah.
And they say it's got to be delivered in whatever, in Munich on that day. It needs to be available for that specific event. And oh yeah, the logo should be that color, that Pantone code. And yeah, well, and it's got to be cheap. And it's like a giveaway, so it's got to be cheap. Quality, yeah, just make sure the logo is the right color. You know, if it doesn't work, they will pick another one because it's free anyway, right? So in that case, you're asking for it. You're asking for tremendously poor quality, and you might be okay with it. Okay, but if you buy products, I don't know, vacuum cleaners, and you're gonna sell them, and it's gonna be on Amazon, so you know, bad reviews and returns and everything are gonna hurt you. Well, you're gonna get kicked out of Amazon because there's gonna be too many returns.
Because Amazon now carry the liability as well.
If it's non-compliant, Amazon will not even let you list it.
Yeah.
And if you offer a warranty, you'll just go out of business because you picked a product that most likely a product that already exists, that you saw in the showroom, that might not ever have been produced in the past. You don't know. Most of the time, you don't know. And some of the components might be, overrated, and some of the parts might break too easily or whatever.
Fakes, copies, second, third, fourth, fifth hand.
It might be a product they're making for one of your competitors, and that competitor is going to sue you. And you're going to say, "Oh, but it's the Chinese supplier's product."
Yeah.
No,
no, it's not. No.
It's not.
Yeah, I mean, like we said at the start here, or like I said at the start here, it is don't ask, don't tell. This is the most important thing which we must be able to get over to people listening to this. You must specify what you want clearly, definitively, and then you must monitor that. And you must monitor that the supplier will be transparent with you. If not, then you've got the cheap model. So if you value your own brand and you value your own products, I don't see any other way than having a constant validation process in place and overseen. Now, let's look at the thorny issue of end-of-line inspection, or what they tend to call pre-packaging or pre-shipment inspection. The worth of that is not quite zero, but it is not so far higher than zero.
It's the last line of defense, right? But if that's the only line of defense,
then you're...
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. Remember, you cannot inspect in quality. It must be designed in quality.
Yeah. Or inspect it out. Yeah, right. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Oh, it's extremely expensive. I mean, sometimes, like last month, we did a 100% inspection job, sorting, basically.
Yeah.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. But that's the last line of defense. That's because all other preventive mechanisms before that completely failed.
Have been ignored.
And it's even worse if you don't even catch it before shipment and you get the products, you've paid the supplier in full.
Yeah.
They're not going to reproduce for free. Even worse, you already shipped it out, and then you get a bunch of returns and warranty calls and things.
Yeah. So then you could be faced then with total product recalls if they don't meet safety requirements, for example.
Yes, if there are safety issues, yes, definitely. We're getting to the end of the podcast, so let me ask you, the last kind of challenge I kept aside is risk thinking.
My favorite subject, Renaud. My favorite subject.
Chinese manufacturers are not going to tell you, okay, this, and these are huge sources of risk in your product. right?
Yeah.
Again, as I mentioned before, yeah, their incentive is just to produce, to buy the components, put it together, ship it to you, get paid, and then on to the next PO. That's their job. That's the incentive, right? Who is going to think of risk? And why is it so hard sometimes for Chinese suppliers to get on with that kind of program, to analyze risk and detect them, rate them, prioritize them, and actually act on them, and keep following up and keep acting on them, right? This is like pulling teeth out of most of these manufacturers.
Because it comes down to the willingness to accept the truth.
Okay. So they want to...
They don't want to
keep
know
the customer happy, or they don't want to
know what the problems are. If you know what the problems are, then you have to ask questions. Chinese culture is not to ask questions.
Yeah. Chinese culture is the boss knows everything.
Yeah.
The boss is going to just tell us what to do. But then the boss obviously has his own priorities. And hey, you know what? It's 3 p.m. and I gotta go, and this supplier is coming to drink tea, and then after that is gonna take me out to have a good dinner and have a good party, and I'll think about that tomorrow. I got to chase this customer for payment. I got to keep this customer happy. I got to hurry up to get this payment. I'm not gonna delay things. Again, on with the incentives of mass production, not stopping things and going through a structured set of go-no-go gates, validation and verifications. You don't want that.
Validation is something which is sort of like, okay, the evaluation is done in a karaoke and the validation is done sometime later.
Right. Unfortunately, right? Yeah.
I mean, to give you some, if you like, trick of the trade, or something that I always do when I do an audit, is I go to the shop floor and I talk to people and I say, do you have the power to stop production?
Right. Very seldom, right?
Yeah. And the simple answer to that is, if the answer is no, then they do not have a working quality system. If the answer is yes, I can do this, and it's wrote here in the SOP, the chances are they do have a quality system that's working. The simple question which can uncover the real situation in a company.
Or what is the escalation system, right? Maybe they might say, well, I'm just the team leader here. I cannot stop it. But if this is the escalation, if I see that many types of a certain defect in a row on the same shift, then I need to pull them aside. First, they're visible because they're in like red boxes or something. And then I call the supervisor. Yeah, right. I isolate them. I go look at the root cause if possible, if it's in the area or the upstream process. I tell the supervisor and the quality people, they come. And then if it keeps coming, then the supervisor will talk with the production manager or whatever, or it goes up to the quality manager who will say stop, or there's got to be some kind of escalation, right? But I mean, even in Toyota, it's not like they can stop it forever, right? But they pull the cord, beep, 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 beep. The other guys come running, and then they have a little bit of a buffer. So it actually doesn't stop the whole chain. They have a little bit of inventory buffer. So, if it's fixed within, 1 or 2 minutes, no impact actually on the production of that day. But then if it's still not fixed, some other guys come running and then they might really stop it, right? But it's so expensive to stop it. Stopping production is something that a lot of buyers sometimes think they should stop right away, but the economic implications of that are so heavy. The right approach to this usually is to have some kind of escalation system,
but that escalation system must be immediate.
Yeah, you need to contain. That's for sure. Yeah. You need to contain immediately.
If the answer is, well, I don't know, I'm just a worker, then you've got problems.
So the worker might say, I put it in the red box. So it's visible
Then
or something like that,
that's
right?
visible. Okay, yeah. But if the answer is I have nothing, I just screw this together.
Yeah. It's not my fault. It's the guy before me, so I don't do anything. Well, that is a big problem.
Yeah. Okay. Now, when you think about it, one of the requirements of 9001, let's talk about just 9001, is this concept of joint accountability on quality. And it doesn't say that the boss is accountable for quality, does it? Everybody in the organization must know his effect on quality. So his and her.
Their role. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if they're paid by piece, which is actually still quite common in certain industries, garment, furniture, and so on, in China, well, why would they put the stuff aside? It's actually against their incentives to stop and fix and so on. They just want to, shove it under the carpet. If nobody notices, then it's fine, right?
It's fine, yeah.
And then you have inspectors are really policemen trying to detect it and having to fight because they are reducing people's salary. It's hitting people's pay. That's really a terrible system.
Doesn't work. The concept of inspecting inequality doesn't work on so many levels. Yeah, I mean, I myself cannot comprehend how people could think that can work. And the same as end-of-line inspection. There's no point in having end-of-line inspection because the error's already been made.
Again, if you only do that, of course, it's better to catch it there before you have done full payment to the supplier and before you get it in your warehouse and you disappoint your customers and so on, right? But it's a good learning for next time. You get to do things much earlier, right? It often comes down to this. You failed. Your manufacturer's quality management system has failed, and actually you have failed because if you had picked the right supplier, if you had communicated all the requirements, if you had ensured that they followed the right verification, validation gates, if you have monitored that maybe the prototypes are made the right way, the first article is made the right way, they have the capability, they have the capacity, usually, production is going to be okay. So if production is not okay, actually, as the buyer, you have failed. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree with that. Look at the debacle of the masks, 2019, 2021, 22. God, it seems to have gone on forever. Inexperienced buyers buying products which are supposed to meet medical needs by inexperienced manufacturers. Now, who the hell's at fault? Everybody. All right. And, you had a failure of leadership right to the very top. Okay. And the problem was, when you think about it, if you remember, or if anybody's read the paper which I wrote called Checkmate, we identified that the failure at this happened in 2016, when many governments failed to maintain their emergency stockpiles.
Yes. There were a lot of debates about that in some countries, like, who's at fault? Well, it's way too late to ask the questions.
Yes. You don't ask the cost of insurance when your house is burning down, do you?
Exactly. So all comes down to prevention, risk thinking, and acting on these risks and communicating the right information and getting the right amount of transparency from the supply chain, right? I guess that's a fitting conclusion. These are the key topics for successful quality management in China.
Well, I'll just add one word here, if we may, Renaud. Okay. Check out ISO 37301 2021. Go look at it. Yeah. And we covered it in podcast number 153. Correct. All right. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Clive. And thanks for the listeners, and send us some questions, by the way, if you have any feedback on this, and leave us a 5-star review also in Apple Podcast or Stitcher or whatever app that you are using to listen to this podcast.
Thank you, and you will hear from us next week as usual. All right. Thanks a lot, Clive.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.